This is part 2 of steps 4 and 5. Apparently, I had a lot to say in part 1. So go back and listen to that first if you have not already done so. So we're talking about related services and all the options that are available for related services. And again, any student with an IEP may receive related services that are necessary for the student to benefit from special education, again, for that particular student. Okay, so we want to keep that in mind. Who provides it? We talked about that. Where are they provided? Again, in the least restrictive environment, whatever that means for that student. Again, here's an example for Phoebe, going back to our, Meet Our Students chapter. So here's what the little code is. So she does have some behavioral challenges, remember? So she, location, this would be the resource, let me say, there you go, or excuse me, the regular classroom, 5 hours daily. Here's a start date. Again, the duration is 1 year. Then they also think she would benefit from some behavior intervention in the school psychologist office, 60 minutes a week. Here's the begin date and here's the duration. So here's the difference, right? 5 hours a day in a resource classroom, 60 minutes a week in the school psychologist office. So different locations, different frequencies, and different amounts of times. Because remember, she had some goals to improve her behavior. All right, so some supplementary aids and services. These, excuse me, these are, something like the ways teachers present information. So maybe large print or something like that. The ways students complete tasks. And so you want to think about here, incorporating some universal design for learning. I think you probably have learned about that in one of your other courses, or you're probably familiar with that. But thinking about a student who has difficulty grasping math concepts, well, they might need some instruction with manipulatives, right? While the other students are moved beyond the manipulatives and the concrete objects. Maybe your one particular student needs manipulatives. Okay, they also think about the ways the teacher teachers, I can't talk in part 2 apparently, assess student learning. So maybe some additional time, right? We've all probably seen that. If we have a student who has a health impairment, they only come to school in the afternoon, so they will need tests scheduled for the afternoon. Or if you have a student, and by the afternoon, because of a health impairment they might have, by the afternoon, they are so tired, they are so wiped out. Well, then guess what? Don't schedule big things, high ticket things for them in the afternoon. Schedule those in the morning. That would be a supplementary aid or service. Okay, also think about the ways teachers structure the environment. So in this case, there are some things that you as the teacher, you can control, you can change, you can adjust how you present information, how you have the students complete tasks. Do they have to be the same for every single student? No, right? You want to do what is appropriate for student A and what is appropriate for student B. The way you assess learning, again, might be different for every student. I had one student who had really poor fine motor skills, so I let him take his spelling test on the computer. Did it change anything about what he was doing? No, all it changed was how I assessed his learning. Okay, you also, again, you can control how you structure the environment. I also had a student back in Charleston, he had leg braces and he had a walker. So I worked with the gen ed teacher. He was just, I think he was just resourced with me. But I worked with the gen ed teacher and really thought about how to set up her classroom so that this particular student had access, equal access like everybody else to all parts of the classroom. So little things like this can really make a big difference. Okay, so who receives supplementary aids and services? Again, any student with an IEP if necessary for the student to benefit from special ed. Who provides them? Gen ed teacher, paraeducator, special educator, related service provider, etc. Where, again, that's that least restrictive environment that is independent for that particular student. And how do I write them? Well, I just showed you an example, right? And here's another example. So one might be paraeducator in the general classroom for 4 hours. So this was from Cadence, Cadence's IP. So this would be daily. There would be a paraeducator kind of assigned to that classroom for 4 hours. So the paraeducator is there to support the teacher's instruction and facilitate student learning for cadence and other students, right? They might not have official IEPs, but the paraeducator can also help some of those other students. Okay? All right, so now we want to think about program modifications or support. So some program modifications include interventions and accommodations necessary for the teacher. And it really could say teachers, professionals, adults, whoever, to help the student achieve their IEP goals. For example, a program of positive behavioral supports to help the student learn more appropriate behavior. And then some support might include special training for teachers to help them meet unique or specific needs of students in the classroom. So for example, if you have a student who has a communication device, well, you need to learn how to enter words or new vocabulary into that communication device. Or if you have a student who uses PECS, picture exchange communication system. I don't know if a lot of students actually still use that. But you would need training on that. Okay, so here are the differences between modifications and program modifications and support. Again, who receives them? You guessed it. School personnel who are responsible for addressing a student's goals, right, to make that student more likely to meet their goals. That's personnel who would receive program modification. So who provides them? It could be someone with more specific training. It could be another special educator, paraeducator, stuff like that. Again, where are they provided? We've talked about this in whatever environment will allow the student to meet their annual goals in the LRE. And how do I write them? Here's an example. So this one is for Phoebe. School psychologist will consult with gen ed teacher to teach and model behavioral data collection and positive reinforcement in the classroom. So maybe the gen ed teacher doesn't really know how to collect data about Phoebe's behavior. That's where the school psychologist might come in and say, hey, let me walk you through this. Let's work together. So this would be in other, I think, right? The O or the frequency. Initial training and follow-up as needed. So kind of other, right? Not daily, not weekly, not monthly, just kind of as needed. And then it's not a daily, weekly, or monthly frequency. Okay. All right. Oh, I skipped some special factors that we want to consider. We want to think about all of these special factors: behavior, limited proficiency in English, blind or visually impaired, if the student is deaf or hard of hearing. The IEP team, must consider those needs. If there are language or communication needs, if the student needs Braille, if there's any assistive technology devices or services, stuff like that. Okay, all of those special factors need to be considered. And here's one way that they might be addressed in the IEP. Certain things are not needed, and these other components that are needed, well, they're already in the IEP. So Cadence's IEP is a good example because she needs communication and or language services. Oh, and I need to move along. Apparently, I just want to talk about steps 4 and 5 a lot. But I'm running out of time on this one as well. All right, how does the team decide? Again, very independent, right? Individualized, I should say. There are some examples that you want to look at, okay? You don't have to do anything with these examples. Remember, if you want to write something down, you can, and then compare your answers with the appendix, but you do not need to do that, okay? You also want to consider, we talked about those special factors. And then thinking about decisions about the date, frequency, location, and duration of services to be provided. The date, the frequency, we've talked about that a little bit, location and duration. Okay, anything tricky? Of course, there's something tricky. There always is, right? We want to remember that special class is not a service. Special class is a location. Wait, is that right? Yeah, okay, hold on. For example, is incorrect. So in this case, special class is a location, right? We said special education is not a location, but if we were to say they're going to receive their reading instruction in a special class, that is actually a location. All right, so where will they receive their specially designed instruction? That might actually be a location, but special education is not a place. Okay, all right, here's some other things to consider. All right, and now we are moving on to step 5. All right, this is the longest worded one ever, so I'm just going to let you all read that. So this is all about non-participation with non-disabled students in the regular class and in extracurricular and other non-academic activities. People tend to forget about this extracurricular and other non-academic activities. So you want to make sure, again, the LRE, you want to assume every student with disabilities will be involved and make progress in the gen ed curriculum and participate with non-disabled peers in gen ed classes and extracurricular and non-academic activities to the extent possible or appropriate or feasible for that particular student. But remember, if the student is not or cannot participate as just described here, you need to determine why participation is not appropriate and include a statement about that, okay? So it's not just you're going to say, yeah, it's not appropriate. Well, why not? And make sure you include a statement about why that student, why it's not appropriate, excuse me, for that student to participate in a non-academic activity or something like that. Okay, so you want to think about not confusing these terms with the general curriculum, right? Because the general curriculum can be taught in a separate special education setting, but the students would be excluded from participating with their peers without disabilities. So you want to take a few minutes and look through these terms of general class, extracurricular activities, such as sports, peer leadership, knowledge bowl, quiz bowl, school club, something like that. A student with a disability, right? They should have just the same access to these extracurricular activities as students without disabilities. We also want to think about non-academic areas. Breakfast, some schools do breakfast, lunch, recess, school assemblies. Well, are you going to exclude a student with a disability from an assembly? No, you better not, right? And your school better not. So you want to think about that. You want to think about the concerns, how the IEP team determines if a student will not participate. Again, here's an example. Martha is highly sensitive to noise and crowds of people. So knowing that these sensitivities adversely affect her behavior and thus her progress in the curriculum, her team decided to exempt her from eating lunch in the cafeteria at the same time as other students and from participating in noisy, crowded classroom activities. But there's a reason, right? There's a statement of why they decided to make this plan. So you can't just say, oh yes, Bob's not going to eat lunch. Well, why not? Or Bob's not going to eat lunch in the cafeteria. Why not? Okay, so be specific and come up with that statement of why. So again, here's a statement for Cadence. Cadence will not participate in math and language, arts in the gen ed 1 to 2 times per week so that she can receive one-to-one instruction from the special education teacher, right? They decided she really needs that intensive instruction. So let's remove her from math and language in the gen ed classroom 1 to 2 times per week so that she can use that time to go see the special ed teacher. All right, so that's where, that statement kind of comes up. Okay, so again, how is this determined? We just kind of talked about that. Must include a statement on the IEP, an explanation of the extent to which the student will not participate in the regular school program. Again, individualized for each student. There are some activity or some examples in the textbook you do not remember. You do no. I tried to say a lot of words at the same time. You do not have to submit anything for your turn, but if you want to try them and then check the answers in the appendix. Okay, and that ends step 5. Woo! So our next recording will cover chapters 6 and 7, the last 2 steps in the process. All right, that's it for now.